Welcome everyone to episode 4 of Talkin' Talent. We had a bit of a hiatus, but we're back today and I'm thrilled to be talking with Stephanie Cramer, who leads human resources and talent at MGAC, a local DC firm, and Nat Jones, who is a partner at Cordia Resources and a teammate of mine as well. Stephanie and Nat bring over 40 years of recruiting and people experience to this conversation. We dive into the current market, recruitment marketing, employer value propositions, salary counteroffers, and so much more. Hope you enjoy the episode and don't forget to subscribe. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our 4th episode of Talkin' Talent. I would love if you tell your friends and coworkers about this, subscribe to it on Spotify or check it out on Cordia's website. I'm Sam McCarthy and I lead the HR practice here at Cordia. I am joined today by 2 amazing guests, one that I've gotten to know well just recently and one that I work with on a daily basis. So I'm going to introduce you to Stephanie Cramer, who's the Vice President of Human Resources and Talent Acquisition with MGAC. Stephanie, thank you for joining us today.
Hi there. Thank you for having me, Sam. I appreciate it.
And Nat Jones, who is a partner at Cordia and also leads the executive search practice with especially in accounting and finance. He's been a teammate of mine for the last 3+ years and someone who's really acted as a mentor to me since I've joined the business. Nat, thanks for joining us.
Stan, thanks so much. Excited and honored to be here.
Well, thank you guys. Today, we are going to be talking about what else? We're talking about recruiting and talent acquisition. This is a topic we haven't really covered yet. Most of the topics thus far have been more general HR topics, and we'll weave some of that in. We're going to talk about recruitment strategy and marketing, salary discussions, negotiation, counter offers, and I'm sure we'll weave in some other things as well. So let's get to it. I want to start off all of these episodes by kind of taking us back to something that you did early in your career, or maybe it was a job you had in high school or college. What was it? What was maybe it was your first job ever? And is there any correlation to that job and maybe what you're doing right now? Let's start off with Stephanie. What do you got for us? I'm sure there's something interesting in your past.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to share 2, one for levity's sake and the other for, a real career path. My first job ever was as a lifeguard in Missouri at a country club pool in the middle of nowhere. That sounds kind of fancy. It wasn't. But no real correlation to my career path. I truly just wanted to get a tan, if I'm being honest. I had my priorities in line as a 16-year-old. And then my first true career professional job, I was a project manager at Sprint in Kansas City. So they employ half the city. And, at the time I was like, I don't know, project management, that'll work. It'll give me a paycheck. And, in hindsight, it really did pay off in a big way. There's so many things that I do from an HR strategy perspective that is project management related, implementing new tools and strategies, systems, change management, stakeholder management. I mean, all of it, so it actually had a path.
Nat, what do you got? Well, a couple thoughts, and I will say that the first full-time job I had, which I'll get to in a second, is interesting. But the prelude to that is that when I got out of college, I didn't have anything lined up. I wasn't too worried about it. I felt like I would land on my feet somewhere. I was living in Florida for a brief time, and my first official job that I was paid out of school, I was a copywriter. I was an English major. I had a psychology minor. And I walked into an ad agency in Sarasota, Florida, and I asked to talk to the creative director. And the creative director came out surprised, not sure what to think of me. And I said, I want to write copy for your firm and I'll work for free. So they hired me part-time for free for a week. And then I think he felt so bad that he paid me $5 an hour for the next couple months. So that was my first official job out of school. But my first full-time kind of professional opportunity was I was an account coordinator with a small public relations firm in Boston, about 15 people, very small. Everybody got to know each other. Everybody worked together on projects. As an account coordinator, about 1/3 of my job was to go down a list of media contacts and pick up the phone and cold call them. Now, I didn't know much about cold calling, but I think I had kind of the fiber in me to do it. I had the guts to do it. I wasn't afraid of it. And I started calling, and I would go through these lists, and every eighth call someone would pick up, and they'd give me a few minutes to pitch a story. And basically I was pitching stories about clients that we had. I was advertising press releases to them. And I remember after doing that for a couple of weeks and having a little bit of success and passing some leads along to my account directors, I remember thinking and reflecting on that process, thinking, wow, this would be kind of neat if I was incentivized to succeed. And lo and behold, the last 24 years of my life has been in recruiting, where your efforts will yield professional, developmental, and financial success. So I thought that was an interesting reflection point in my career. And I definitely would say that it was a little spooky back then to see me doing that, and then realizing that I've been recruiting, and that was the career that I chose. So.
Wow, that I've told this before, but I had my first real job was as working in a grocery store and basically stocking shelves part-time. It was at the time something that I, making minimum wage was fine to get me through the summers. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, I don't think I knew that. I know a lot of things about you. I don't think I knew that you did it for free, and then you just kind of walked in, and but I could see that. That's your personality. I think it's you've built on that over the years, and I'm sure that's definitely helped you.
I think great. So. I think so. And Sam, by the way, you were probably the most approachable stocking guy in the grocery store. So I'm sure people have enjoyed having conversations with you. So
I don't know. I wasn't much of a morning person back then. I had to get in, I think, before the store opened. So I don't know if that's true or not. And Stephanie, Sprint is still based in Kansas City, right? I mean, that's still. Yeah.
They are. However, T-Mobile acquired them. And
okay.
So actually T-Mobile is one of MGAC clients. And so it's funny talking about that now, because we're in the Midwest working on integration of Sprint into T-Mobile. So it's come full loop. Nice.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that's not, that can kind of throw people for a loop, but it's fun to think back on. Let's get into the meat of what we're talking about. I just want to generally talk about the current market out there right now. So we're in the Washington, D.C. metro area. I know that a little bit specific, some of these things can be specific to D.C. or other major metropolitan areas. But what are some of the things that some themes, some of the things you think of that depict the current talent market? And is there anything in your past that either of you have experienced, times in your life that you can compare this to, different, whether it's 10, 15, 20 years ago? Would just love to hear about that from both Stephanie and Nat. Stephanie, why don't you share from your side what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the talent acquisition space now since 2005. And there's things that are the same. There's things that are different. I would say the market that we're in right now, I'm sure everyone has heard, the hashtags. I mean, the war for talent. I mean, it's bananas. It truly is bananas right now. But I would say the talent that we're dealing with is extremely savvy. They're beyond educated in not just in terms of what they do, but in terms of how recruiting works and how they can, be a self-agent for getting into companies and whatnot. But, from a tools perspective, it's changed in a big way from when I started to today. You can be so much more efficient. But what really gives me comfort is that even from 2005 to today, we're still dealing with humans, right? Like, we're still people. We haven't changed so much. So the psychology behind what drives people to make change, career changes. I'd love to hear what Nat has to say, but it's the same for me. It's we're still people, we're still humans, we still have the same values, and it's fun to kind of dig into all that.
And Stephanie, that was perfect that you mispronounced my name, because that happens to me once a day. So I hit my quota. There you go. So
I caught myself. I'm like, dang it, did I really just do that?
Okay, this is where I step in and say it's Nat, like the baseball team here in DC.
Oh, I appreciate that.
No, those are interesting thoughts. I think that, Sam, you asked about, could you compare this time in our lives and careers to any other time that we've been through? And Stephanie and I have been in the business for roughly the same amount of time. I think I would reflect back to the 2000 .com craze, where there was an abundance of opportunities. There was an above average pay craze going on. There were 3 to 4 year public accountants getting control roles where they were going to these companies that haven't even booked revenue, and they were being promised a dream that a bunch of them never really reached. And some of these companies, as we know, made it, and people did really well at a very young age. And then some people were out, they were given these amazing offers and they were feeling really good about themselves. And then a year later, they would lose their job and they had to get back into the market and right-size themselves back into certain salary bands. So I would say, if you compare what we've been going through over the past 2.5 years, I would say that from a reactive perspective, as a recruiting professional, we're always playing coach, we're always playing counsel, we're always playing therapist, we're helping, we're always connecting humans. And at our core, that is what we do. And in that process, we tell stories. And I think that one of the toughest adjustments that I know personally I've had to make, and I can speak for some of the people in my company, not everybody, but is that we've had to do more with less time. It's a very Darwinian market. It's been, everybody sort of woke up as we started the pandemic, and there were certain companies that were, Stephanie, you might agree with me, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but time to fill went from, call it, if a company had a goal of 60 days, they were closing jobs in 30 days. And that was primarily due to the reliance upon technology for interviewing. And all these candidates went home and they were in front of their computers. They didn't have to negotiate physical office interviews through recruiters or through internal HR people to go see the people. They would just be interviewed, and we're talking an hour Zoom and an offer. And so I think that the rushed nature of the recruiting process as we've gone through the pandemic has really taken people by surprise. And Stephanie, I agree with you. The savvy nature of candidates has never been more on the surface than it is right now. The preparation, the research, the wherewithal to try and get more money, the wherewithal to try to negotiate an extra day from home. Working around that hybrid topic has never been more challenging for recruiters. The hybrid is a new thing to us. And so we've really tried to work in the gray areas. And I think that's been very tough. But we've just had less time to work with the demands on our desks. I know that my to-do list has never been more sped up ever in my career. So I would say it's been a very Darwinian market, and it's been very rushed. Those are the terms that I would use to sort of describe what we've been through.
Taking it a step further, it's really interesting because at my company right now, we have a heavy focus on developing that deep virtual talent bench. So we don't necessarily always have a job open when we're talking to talent. And so we want to know who the players are and develop those deep relationships so that we're prepared when timing works for the candidate and for us. But even managing that strategy and that nuance with kind of the challenges that you've just described it's been very interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Stephanie, how many, just out of curiosity, I mean, how many open roles do you have right now? And is it manageable? Are you at a place where you feel like you have the right team surrounding you to be able to fill those? Are they because of growth? Are they because of turnover? What are you dealing with right now?
Yeah, so MGAC is a professional services firm, and in that professional services model, oftentimes the right person can actually drive the business growth. And so to the point that I made just a second ago, we really try hard to have that virtual bench in place so that the second something pops, we're prepared. We don't hold, a deep, overhead, right? A deep physical bench. We want our utilization to be, at a good, healthy place. So managing that balance is really challenging. I would say the number of like true active open positions that we have right now are probably 15 to 20 in the US. And then we just went through an international acquisition. So I'm bringing that talent acquisition function internally. And I would say there's eight-ish positions over there as well. But again, the job isn't always what drives our growth. Oftentimes it's having the right person in place, the right candidate in place, and then reverse marketing them into our clients. And lo and behold, we've broken into a new territory.
Thank you for sharing that. I know, Stephanie, another thing that we had discussed prior to you joining today, and something that you're passionate about, not only just at MGAC, but just in general, is making sure that the employee value proposition internally in your organization, and marketing, doing recruitment marketing and taking that to another level. Those are things that are important, as well as corporate strategy. Can you expand on that a bit in terms of from the corporate side, the company side, what that might mean to you and what you're doing now, and maybe some wins, and then some things that maybe you'd love to do but just haven't done yet?
Yeah, absolutely. So your employee value proposition is everything. Being able to do recruitment marketing, you have to have not just a good story to tell, but you have to have the real employee experience, the real culture to back it up. And in this market, it is so competitive that you have to have everything in place. You have to truly be a talent destination and an employer of choice. So you threw out a lot of questions there, but just I did touch on all of them. In terms of strategy, I don't think anyone can say it better than the people, our employees that are actually doing the work today. So getting their voices out there is completely top of mind for me. I think video is doing a lot for us these days. And so we're working with a couple of vendors right now to come up with a video capture solution to easily get our employee voices out there. Different, awarding systems, top places to work, review systems. I mean, I'm really trying to approach it from a holistic perspective to get a clear picture of what it's really like on the inside, to get that out there. We're doing a massive website redesign that should be launched, knock on wood, in December. I'm sure my senior VP of marketing is sweating bullets that I said that officially. But yeah, it's that whole focus. We're approaching that website redesign not only just from a client perspective, which I would say, historically was the main drivers behind those things. Now it's like, oh no, it is very clear that there are two audiences for our website. It's not just, the clients, but we need to really be able to convey a true picture of what it looks like internally to work here, because it all matters. Every single touch point, a potential candidate has is a data point that forms a greater narrative in terms of who we are, and it all matters.
I'm curious too, and I know something that Nat and I talk about a lot, and anybody who's with a who's with a recruiting firm and is working with a client, we're talking to candidates who may say, I had an interview with this company. I talked to 3 people, and 2 out of the 3 I thought were great, and one person kind of just was going through the motions, and they didn't really sell the company that well, and they didn't seem like they even really wanted to be there. I know that's a challenge right now, especially as Nat mentioned earlier, in a virtual world where you're doing interviews like this. You're doing interviews via Zoom, which is what platform we're on right now. Do you see that? Is that something that you've had a more of a focus on? Is there internal training that you're doing, or if not, do you recommend that so that as you mentioned, every person who's part of that interview process, that you're selling the company to a candidate just as much or more than the candidate is selling themselves to you. Stephanie, was that something that you see, or have you gotten feedback from candidates about that? And I guess how much does MGAC play, I guess do or train managers on that?
Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point. It's a work in progress for us. We have managers that have conducted interviews for an extremely long time. We have managers that are brand new to it. We're trying a lot to empower our teams and to develop and grow people internally. So yeah, I have a lot of new senior project managers, just asking the questions like, hey, are these the questions that I should be asking? And yeah, the point that you just brought up there is huge, in that it's gone are the days of just, the employer interviewing the candidate. You have got to be selling every step of the process, or else it's not going to go.
And gone are the days of people just lining up to work for your company.
Yeah.
And gone are the days of people not being accountable to contributing to one message as a brand for your company.
Yeah.
And I call this assembling the troops. And we have this really, I'll call it an interesting perspective as a third-party recruiter, whereby we work with dozens and hundreds of companies. So we have to be very agile as we adapt to each company style of interviewing. And in that process, you start to learn who's got bad traits and who's really good at it. And a company may not be able to hold a candle of success to another company, but if a candidate walks out with a consistent message and a consistent impression, and you can tell that the troops have been assembled, i.e., Stephanie, you might gather your interview team and say, okay, we're interviewing Jane again. She's been in for 2 interviews. I just want to let you guys know that, 4 out of the 5 stakeholders really like Jane. We'd like your input. Here are some of the things that I'm envisioning you guys talking to them about. What ideas do you have? I think there's something lost in the interview process where people just get scheduled. And not to say people aren't busy these days. They have to fit in, video interviews in between their own meetings and adapt to that interview style as opposed to just their meeting style. But really, it's about having everybody on the same page, right? And you have to speak the same gospel. You have to be able to have one consistent message so that, as Sam said, all 3 out of 3 are making a good impression. All 3, and quite frankly, I think sometimes I would argue that more internal interviewers probably need a little bit more guidance on interviewing.
So true.
And that is a very slippery slope, because as busy as we are, some of these stakeholders really don't want to take that type of critique from an internal talent VP director, or not to mention a third-party recruiter who might have a clue what he's doing. But at the same time, we all have one message, one goal to get to where we need to be. And so in our world, making sure that our partners, I call it partnership quality. That's the bottom line. It's partnership quality. And the excellent partnerships that I personally have, they listen to us. They really value what we see on the street, in the market, with our candidates, with our clients. And there is a recipe for success, but it is creating that one message, that one impression, and everybody has to carry that impression. It's like moving the ball downfield, And the person that doesn't realize that being unprepared or not asking intelligent questions isn't going to make the right impression probably shouldn't be in that interview process.
Yeah, Nat, what I was just going to say, kudos to you, with having clients that do that. I mean, it takes a lot to become a trusted advisor. That's not just handed out, right? And that's not just something that, an external recruiter is working hard towards. That's something that, me as, the vice president of human resources, I work on that every single day. Like, how can I ensure that the business leaders that I'm supporting, truly see, the function as a trusted advisor role. And so you have to earn that. I have weekly syncs with, those teams that are hiring, everyone that's involved in the interview process, to collaborate, to ensure that everyone's on the same page, that we're really providing, that market intelligence capture for how we're going to be successful in landing the talent that we need. And if I don't have operational adoption as top of mind for how to get that team on on the same page, I'm going to fail. And so it really is such a valued time to come together to really invest on that and bring the troops together.
Agreed.
And one of the things that's most important when candidates are going through interviews and interested in your company is how much they're going to get paid. And there are a lot of things right now that are important when people are looking at changing jobs. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but in the last couple of years, flexibility is important as ever. Benefits are as important as ever. By flexibility, mostly meaning, not just how many days am I going to be in the office, but flexibility around, if I have a doctor's appointment, I want to be able to come in late, and I don't want that necessarily my time being micromanaged to the extent. I think things like that. So those are all important benefits, flexibility, work location, but people still need to get paid, and salary is, I think, in a good way, moving in a good direction for more transparency across the board. And I think states that are putting that in place are great. We have a long way to go, but with two experts here who have lots of years of dealing with not only talking to candidates about salary, but on both sides of the business, right? Nat and Stephanie have both worked on both sides of this business. We'll start with Nat on this one. For you, coming from and being in the environment that you and I are in now, and talking with candidates about this, but also if you were talking with Stephanie as a client, what are some of the trends you've seen recently, and how do you go about, let's say, preparing a candidate for that discussion, and how would you go about talking with a client about having that same discussion?
Setting expectations, and setting more expectations. Expectations will carry you to the finish line every single time. The lack of communication that exists, whether you're an internal HR recruiting leader or you're a third-party recruiting firm person, if you don't cover your bases before you get to the table to discuss an offer, you are setting yourself up for failure, not to mention in a pandemic world where people are knowledgeable about the market. They are knowledgeable that the market's in very good shape. They are going after more money. They are asking for more. So as you start to court a candidate, there are touch points, there are checkpoints that you have to commit to as you're going through, whether it's Stephanie chasing an executive potential hire for her company, or Nat Jones looking for a controller for Stephanie's company. The congruency of the communication has got to be there on all sides. And so what I find is that if someone gets off the leash and they're running around asking for too much money, or they're asking for too much vacation time, the expectations were not set properly from the start. Think about how many times you've talked to candidates and perhaps the salary range did not come up. Or in my world, we've talked to a candidate and they say, "Oh, I just want to let you know I'm interviewing with ABC company down the street. I applied on my own and they called me. I have a fourth interview tomorrow." And I always say, "How does comp look?" "Oh, it hasn't really been discussed yet. Not really sure." And so then I end up giving as much pro bono advice as I can to make sure that they're prepared for that. And that's very challenging, because it's clear to me that if companies are not prepared, they're going to get abused when it comes to point of trying to make a match in the end. And so I try and set expectations in everything that I do. I am not perfect, but I try, and it's a lot of work. But I think candidates really appreciate when you introduce the little elephants in the room and you say things like, "Look, I know we talked about your salary requirements being this. I just want to let you know that you're pretty much in the range. You can have faith in me that I'll do everything I can to negotiate a great offer, but let's talk reasonably right now about how you're feeling about the salary as you go into your final interview, because a lot can change in a couple of days. A lot can change in competitive analysis with other opportunities. And candidates don't necessarily volunteer that information. So you need to be professionally investigative. You have to ask questions and peel back layers, because ultimately, in the end, that's going to save you pain when you're trying to get to the table and land a candidate.
I just keep shaking my head here. I'm like, my poor team is probably so sick of hearing me say this. I mean, I say it ad nauseum, and it was the same, when I worked in agency. It's the same in-house today. The only control you have as a recruiter, as in, talent acquisition, as an account manager, all of it is in how you spend your time. I don't have the ability to make a hiring manager extend an offer, and I don't have the ability to make that candidate accept that offer. And so, by God, I will ask all the questions, right? So, and I'll preface it, in the beginning, I'll even say, look, I realize this probably feels like we're putting the cart before the horse, and it feels premature, but is there a range that you're trying to work within, or a goal that you have in mind? And, the trends around transparency on compensation, I agree that it's good. I agree that, we've got work to do in terms of how to get our company at a place that can truly support that model. But yeah, the more transparent you can be, and I say, look, like, this is not going to be handed out, right? Like, you're going to have to earn it in an interview, because, the compensation that's provided needs to be commensurate, right, with the skills and experience you bring to the table. But yeah, you only control your time. So yeah, make sure you set all those expectations accordingly.
And I think a lot of candidates, quite frankly, are looking for guidance, right? They know that it's uncomfortable to talk about salary. Everybody knows that everybody likes their own brand. Everybody wants more money. Everybody thinks they should be worth more. That's human nature.
Yeah.
But there are guidelines to success, and there are teachers and professors in this business that will help these candidates become more knowledgeable and more adept at maneuvering through the process. And that's something that every single day of our careers we do. And it's not always easy, and it does yield friction sometimes. But once you get through that friction, people really appreciate that extra level of effort. And I think if there's tough love behind this approach, people will respect you. And at the end of the day, if you don't even land that hire, they will respect your efforts and your transparency in the end. And ultimately, Stephanie, that makes your company look better, because you are the cheerleader, you are the representative for your company.
Yeah, absolutely. And they'll appreciate that. And you have a long-term relationship, as opposed to that short-term, quick hit.
What comes after that, if you find the right candidate, you make them an offer, things seem great. As Nat mentioned, that great candidate probably is interviewing 1-2 other places, probably is going to get another offer if they're putting themselves out there. Candidates negotiating for either, it's not always salary, sometimes it's other things, sometimes it's different benefits, it's more PTO. There's usually some kind of counteroffer in some capacity. Stephanie, what is your mindset, I guess, whether it's something that MGAC does, or just your general take on counteroffers, how you handle that? Has that changed over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. So similar to the point that Nat just brought up a second ago, I'm asking those questions, right? I cannot control anything but my time. And so I actually take on like a coaching role. And I ask the question, I'm like, okay, well, so it's awesome that, we have you, verbally accepting this offer. We're going to get the written out to you. We'll get that signed. How is this going to go over, with your current manager? I even bring that up in the very first interview, the screen that I have with candidates. Like, okay, great. Like, how do you think it's going to go over when you resign? Because that's going to happen. You will get an offer somewhere, and how's your manager going to receive that? What's the relationship like there? And the responses I get are entertaining, right? They're across the board. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, this is a foregone conclusion. There will be zero surprise. It's not a problem. Other times, just like, oh gosh, I haven't thought about that. And I'm like, yeah, we should probably think about that. Like, and let's strategize, right? Like, let's put a plan in place. Like, I'm sure, Nat, you're the same way. I can't tell you how many times I've coached a person through this. I'm like, okay, let's go ahead and should we script it out? Like, we can do that too. I mean, yeah, I really hold their hand throughout that whole process, because at the end of the day, it's just going to stack the deck in my favor. I'm going to help that person right along the way. And that's what they're going to remember.
I almost call it, sorry to chime in. I almost call it interviewing unconscious.
Yeah.
They don't even know why they're interviewing. They just think that they should go interview. And I'm with you. You ask questions. I ask questions. I go so far against the grain to preserve pain in the end that candidates will occasionally say to me, "Aren't you trying to place me? Don't you want to get me a job?" Yeah, I'd love to find you something. I would love to. But
For sure.
what you're saying to me, it sounds like to me your situation is not as dire as you might think. There's a lot of information you've shared with me that is maybe not completely dug up yet. And if you're saying that you feel under challenged, and you're saying that you might need an extra day or two from home, and you haven't had those conversations, I encourage you to go to your boss. It doesn't, and as we investigate and we do due diligence and we dig for pain and we diagnose people on a daily basis, sometimes these people really are not unhappy, but someone gave them bad advice or their friend left and they just think, well, if she left, I should get out of here too. And so you almost end up being on the other side of the fence, you end up being a hero, and they remember you for that. And then they respect you because you aren't just trying to pave over their lack of pain to go place them, And I think that's a misstart in our business. And I think people need to be conscious that just because someone's interviewing doesn't mean that they are unhappy. And you can talk about the passive candidate pool all you want. I would argue and I would submit that during the pandemic, Stephanie, the passive candidate pool went like this. It widened tremendously because you had people that were looking for pay raises. They were remote. They felt like they were off the leash. Well, my friend just got a pay raise, so why can't I just go get a 15% pay raise? I had two really good referrals sent to me in April and May of 2020. Both ended up staying. I basically said to them that I don't have enough information right now to be able to help you. I would absolutely advise you to stick it out. And they stuck it out. And I feel like the passive pool has never been more complicated. And you bake in the hybrid model, and you've got people that are coming to us saying, "Oh, I'll go in the office 3 times a week." And then they have another offer that's remote. And all of a sudden, 2 days later, their story changes. So I think you have to have your tactics ready no matter where you are in the process of candidates.
So true. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about almost advising them on how to manage their current employer situation. I actually even mentioned that I wrote an article that was published by Forbes not too long ago on talent acquisition and solution selling. And yeah, touched just on that very thing. Like I've advised people to say, well, this sounds like a problem that could just be overcome by having a conversation with your manager. Have you done that? I think it would serve you well just to take the 10 minutes, just to talk through that. And, yeah, you could look at it from a very short-sighted perspective in that, like, well, that doesn't serve you, Stephanie. Oh yeah, it does. Oh yeah, it does. Right. Like, because I've become that trusted advisor. I've got a candidate relationship for life because they remember that type of stuff. And, I wouldn't be surprised if in a year, 2 years that I'm probably placing that person, in our company.
And I loved your article, by the way. I did read it. So
thank you. Appreciate that.
But yeah, I think really this concept of diagnosing and digging up pain in a candidate situation is really important. And it's part and parcel along with salary. Some people are afraid to peel back layers. Some people are afraid to walk that ledge because they don't want to get too personal and they don't want to send mixed messages. But in everything that we do on our side of the fence, and I would argue you too, internal, external, we are advisors, and you might be staffing up your company. We may be staffing up dozens and hundreds of companies, but at the end of the day, people need that basic career advice. And that's something that we're really passionate about doing, and something we teach our young recruiters. You've got to peel back layers. Every once in a while, I'll get someone come to me, well, she's looking for more growth. She's nervous about the company. Why? Can you tell me more? I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Because there are tactics that candidates use to continue on in the interview process. And the more you know about the business, the more you know how to diagnose it. So I think it's paramount in any recruiting process.
Well, as Stephanie said before, and as she started with this, you're dealing with humans. And I think people go into conversations, whether it's with Nat or with Stephanie, and everyone has the best intentions, and you're only as good as the questions you ask. But I love that your time is valuable. And I love, Stephanie, you mentioned you asked in a first interview towards the end, if you think someone's a good candidate, if we move forward with this, what's gonna happen if we do make you an offer? Are you prepared to go have that conversation if all of a sudden they panic and offer you another $20,000? What are the reasons why you're looking at making this move? So I agree. You go back to the fact that people are human, and we want to be able to help the people that want to be helped. But at the end of the day, asking those questions and digging into it in a very consultative way is something that I know I enjoy. I know I wish I could do it with more people. Our time is only limited to a certain number of people, but really appreciate both your insights on that. Anything else you guys want to share on that topic? Anything otherwise we can wrap this up and let people get on with their days.
I feel good. I feel like we represented it well.
I know you guys could probably talk about this for 2 or 3 hours, so maybe we'll do this again at some point. But really great stuff. Appreciate both of you joining. And for everyone out there listening, go check out Nat and Stephanie. Connect with them on LinkedIn. We'll make sure we have them back on. So thanks to both of you, and we'll do it again soon.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you so much. This has been fun.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.